one of the things that you're showing me quite clearly is that you really haven't looked into the creationist position much at all. You don't understand it.
No, but I have. I've looked into it. I've been looking into it for the past 5 years. I've looked at the creationist evidence, and every time I come up, I find a new creationist explanation for things. It doesn't make sense with what we see in the world today.
Well, if you read the account of the flood, it's obvious that there were things happening there. It talks about the fountains of the great deep being broken up, and we can find evidences left on our world today that it was a time of great volcanism and so forth. There were things happening there on a scale that we don't see today. Which is why some people, you included, believe that it couldn't happen that rapidly. But if you look for it, there are evidences that things did happen on a scale that that isn't being repeated today. And so you see things pushing up very slowly today, and you say, well, it must have taken millions of years to happen. But that's not just the assumption that things are always happening at the same rates that we see today. The whole uniformitarianism that has long been an assumption of geology that actually has proved not fit well, which is why you have the my tongue gets twisted, neocatastrophism, because they realize that uniformitarianism does not adequately account for many of the structures we see in the world today.
Okay, well, I mean, I can't see this, but other than, special pleading. Like, this just sounds like a special pleading argument. You're saying that, oh, well, science worked differently back then. The natural world worked differently.
No,
back then, so that's why it can.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, but
I'm saying that if you examine the geological record, and it becomes obvious from what is left behind on Earth today, when you see those vast, thick, sedimentary layers, flat, and yet thick, and, some of those layers of sandstone, for instance, it's obvious that there was sand deposited in ways and that what we see today, it's just obvious that it wasn't done like anything we observe today. That's why there's many geologists that have turned away from just a strict uniformitarianism, because you can't explain so much of what you see based on just present rates that we've seen in the last few hundred years of modern science.
I'm guessing all of those geologists are creationists?
No, the neocatastrophists are definitely not. They don't necessarily. They haven't necessarily turned to the flood idea, because that has implications that a lot of them aren't necessarily willing to accept. But they still readily admit that there's a lot of this stuff that cannot be accounted for simply based on rates and processes that we've observed in the last few hundred years.
Okay, but I mean, I don't see any evidence of that is like a legit view of the world. Like, you know, saying that this stuff just happens all of a sudden, like rock layers just all of a sudden form. It sounds like an infantile child that's explaining how he destroyed a lamp. Just all of a sudden it fell on the floor. I don't know. It was a ghost. I mean, do you see how it needs a lot of evidence in order to say that, oh, all of these rock layers that date through carbon dating and through other dating methods that date to, you know, thousands and millions of years old, and even billions, when we date those, I mean, they date that long back. And so the uniformitarianism, it seems to hold. Now, I say that it seems to hold because any good scientific theory is going to have a way to disprove it. So, I mean, I just think that you need a lot of evidence in order to prove that, like, all of these layers were laid down at the exact same time or all at one time or in a quick succession or something like that. Just like with fossilization, you would need to prove that you just need to cover it quickly with dirt in order to get it to fossilize. So, I mean, I don't know how.
And I didn't say that covering it quickly was the only requirement. I just said that is one requirement.
Okay, well, I think that there's a difference in.
But But you can look, you know, you can go to the Grand Canyon, you can see all those layers so well exposed. And when you look at the knife edge, you know, transition from one to the other without the mixing or evidence of animal burrows and roots down through and all the disturbance that usually happens at a soil layer. And then you go on up from there and there's places where those sediments are bent without being, I mean, bent quite sharply without being fractured. Rock that today is very, very hard and brittle that you could never bend like that today. And actually, you know, more than one layer bent together. And it gives indication that those layers had still not completely hardened when they bent. And again, these things are areas of ongoing research for people of creation persuasion.
Yeah, but not for the rest of science.
Huh?
I said, yeah, but not for the rest of science. I mean, that's like trying to prove that the moon is actually just a flat disk orbiting, you know, inside our atmosphere. I mean, there are people out there that are quote unquote researching that, but that doesn't make it anywhere near true. Just because they're going down the rabbit hole doesn't mean that they have a valid rabbit hole in which to explore.
Well, that's true, and then you could say the same thing about, you know, the research that you're supporting as well. We obviously do research, and it includes some buddy trails, and sometimes we get it wrong, and sometimes you've got to, we have these rescuing devices that we use to rescue our theory, explain, well, maybe it could have been this way or it could have been that way. But I still feel like the creationist paradigm is the most satisfying explanation of the facts that we have of what we can observe in the present that has come down to us from the past.
Well, yeah, but you understand how the Bible doesn't go anywhere in explaining anything about our natural world. I mean, in the Bible, you have God spending, a fraction of an instant creating 99.9% of the universe. But then he spends 6 days making Earth, which is a perfect death trap for humans. So I don't that. That's just one problem that I have with the Genesis account. There's also the fact that Adam and Eve.
What's this perfect death trap that you're talking about?
Earth.
Why do you call Earth a perfect death trap?
Well, I mean, like 99% of all animals or all life that has lived here has died. And it's either died from the ecosystem or, it's died from other means. And as far as humans, it being a perfect death trap for humans, I mean, we can't live in the water. We can't really live on the water. There are dense jungles and forests and everything out there when very, very early on in our evolution, we were having to hide out in caves or band together in little societies, which eventually grew into bigger societies in order for us to survive. And that's how we survived. So it is a perfect death trap in just that the ecosystem is based on a carnivore or a predator and prey kind of deal. You have all of the different things on this earth that can kill us, as well as the fact that 70% of the earth is covered in water and it's non-drinkable water. Why would God make us why would God put us on the earth and construct us to have H2O, freshwater H2O, in order to survive, but yet he fills the entire planet with salt water? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, that just seems like God is a toddler up there twiddling around and thinking, oh, well, how can I make this the hardest thing on earth in order to survive? This is Survivor God Edition.
Well, somehow we've done fairly well. And
yeah, and that's easily explained by evolution. Evolution has explanatory power as to how we survived, how we evolved, how we got to our place that we are today. Evolution can explain all of those things, and with the Bible, it just seems like a lazy explanation. It just seems like, you're just like, oh, well, God did it. Guess we don't need to look any more into this. Let's go, y'all. Pi is equal to 3, by the way. Let's try to build ships with that.
Well, one of the things that you're showing me quite clearly is that you really haven't looked into the creationist position much at all. You don't understand it.
No, but I have. I've looked into it. I've been looking into it for the past 5 years. I've looked at the creationist evidence, and every time I find a new creationist explanation for things, it doesn't make sense with what we see in the world today.
Yeah, well, I don't know specifically what you're talking about, but of course, I don't know what makes sense to you, so I guess we'll have to leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I mean, so if you could, before we leave each other, I mean, why do you believe the creation account to be true? Like, if you could boil it down to just like one or two reasons why you accept that to be true.
Well, I believe it provides the best explanation for what we observe in our world today.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I don't see that like explanation.
I mean, especially including the flood, And I feel like there is abundant evidence for the flood on this world, and I realize that a lot of people don't see it. They've explained it away so many and explained it so in different ways so many times, but to me it fits well.
Well, okay. Well, could you tell me what evidence that you know of for the flood?
Well, it starts with the vast layers of sedimentary rock that's found all over the world that tend to correlate with each other, even across continents. And the evidence that they were laid down by water. The different evidences that show excuse me. My mind was going in too many different directions at once. So there's the vast layers of sedimentary water rock. The evidence is that there was little time between layers rather than lots of times because of lack of evidence for erosion between the layers often. And yeah, it's then all the water gaps, for instance, across the earth where you find where it is eroded, the waters coming off the earth eroded these gaps right through mountains, rather when they could have just as easily went around, and different things like that, to me, speak strongly of the flood.
Okay, so no actual scientific evidence.
Well, if these layers aren't, that's no geology.
Well, no, I mean, there's no science to support the idea that, all those layers were laid down quickly or in rapid succession. There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence for anything. At least, I know that you're going to hold to your convictions here. I'm just saying that in my own research, I haven't come across viable explanations that hold up to scientific standards, and so I wouldn't classify those as being scientific. So I feel like you're just sort of looking at things and making up your mind, like just by looking at things instead of actually using evidence.
Okay, I'm not a scientist. I haven't done the investigations myself, but there are scientists who have done scientific research on those rock layers and so forth. I've done a fair amount of reading on it, and I would say it's scientific evidence. I guess you can dismiss it however you want, but that's where I come out.
Well, it's not about me dismissing, the evidence. I'm saying that it doesn't hold up to scientific scrutiny, so therefore it's not science. So it's not that I'm throwing it away or anything like that. I'm just saying that it doesn't actually hold up to actual scientific standards.
Well, I'm not sure why you're saying it doesn't. I feel it does, so...
Well, yeah, but the scientific method...
And I guess neither one of
us feel.
Well, I understand that. Although... Whenever you're looking at historical type of science, it's not like that you can you're looking at events in the past that cannot be repeated. Now, you can do experiments in the present to demonstrate that this can happen or that can happen, and there's such research being done. And yet, it is somewhat different than the scientific method used in operational science, where you can go to the laboratory and you do this and you do these experiments that bear directly to the question. When you're looking at historical things, you cannot do anything, whether you're looking at it from an evolutionary point of view or a creation point of view. There's a limit to what you can actually demonstrate in a laboratory, because you can't go back there and see what did happen.
Well, no, we can't go back there and look and see what happened, but I mean, we can observe the effects of what happened in the past. That's exactly what fossils are. Fossils are are observable things that we can see that are affected by things in the past. It's a lot like, okay, if you came up on a lake and you saw ripples that were emanating from a single point, what would you infer from that?
Hey, heathens. I just kind of wanted to interrupt here by trying to clarify what I was trying to do with this whole rock in the pond analogy to how we see events that happened in the past. What I was trying to do is draw a parallel to, how he was viewing the past, as far as, being told by a book that certain things happen. And how science infers things because of these ripples, right? That's what I was trying to do. I utterly failed in the conversation, and I wish that I had taken a different route, because it really got kind of bogged down in the semantics of the argument that I was using. I don't really think that he understood it. So if I were to go back and redo this part of the conversation, I would definitely say that I'm trying to draw the parallel between this whole catastrophic explanation of how, just things happened all of a sudden, compared to, what we see in actual geological evidence. Because we don't see these catastrophic things just happening like in the Bible, like the fountains of the deep opening up and doing all this other stuff. All of our evidence shows that, like, mountains take millions of years to form, that, fossils don't appear outside of their rock layers. Like, there are certain geological layers that contain specific species, and we never find those species outside of those layers. That would have been a better example of this rock in the pond thing, considering how geology and reality in general shows us a very different picture from what the Bible shows us. I hope that you guys enjoyed this particular portion of the Truth Line conversation. If you will, please give me a like, subscribe, and don't forget to share this guy out. I would really appreciate it. Don't forget to stand up, use your voice. Bye, heathens.